Morning, class.
Morning.
My name is Jim Egan. I'm a 1975 graduate of Appleton West. And I'm going to start out by asking you 3 questions. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands if it applies to you and then keep them up till it doesn't, okay? First question is, how many of you have ever had a nickname? All right, good, okay? Keep them up. Next question, how many of you were not real wild about that nickname? Keep the hands up if you were not wild about it. Okay, pretty many. How many of you actually hated the nickname you were given? All right, we got a few. Okay, put your hands down. I'm going to start there because my nickname story started right here at Appleton West. Okay. When I went to school here, we had open campus. The school was sophomores, juniors, and seniors only. And first year I was here as a sophomore, September, nice day. Me and a bunch of my buddies would go over to Linwood Park to have lunch. We'd ride our bikes over there and bring a couple frisbees and have lunch, make fun of each other, and just goof around. One day we're sitting there, and one of my buddies starts staring at me. He's staring at my head. And this was before we said dude, so I probably said something like, "Man, what's your problem?" And he's looking at me and goes, "Egan, your head is just so big." And I'm like, and the other guy started looking at me, and you know how you see a puppy where their feet are like way bigger than their body, like a lab or a retriever or a golden doodle, and it takes them about a year or two to grow into? Well, I think it was that way with my head and me back when I was a sophomore. So these guys are looking at me, and by the end of that lunch, they're all calling me Big Head, okay? And like a lot of nicknames, I hated it. And because I hated it, it spread around the school like wildfire, so that by the end of the week, everybody's calling me Big Head. And again, I'm totally hating this. And one night at home with my parents, I'm whining about it, having a pity party. And my dad probably got sick of hearing me whine. He goes, "You know, Jimbo, it could be a lot worse." And I go, "What do you mean?" He said, "They could have called you Stinky or Boogers." And you know what? He was right, because my 2 friends, Boogers and Stinky, won't let you call them those names anymore. I don't know how they got those names. I'm sure it wasn't me. But my point is, I was hating that. And then about a week later, I'm in band class, and this girl that was a friend of mine came up to me, and she goes, "Big Head, you really hate that name, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, it's terrible." She goes, "I think it's the coolest nickname in the whole school." It's like, boom! My brain totally reset, because up to that point, I was not capable of seeing it that way. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to like it, I'm starting to love it, and I'm starting to become it. And so, and I'm going to tell you the rest of the story on the Big Head name later. But my point on that is I want to make 2 points opening with that story. The first is that things are going to change for you. You're probably 17, 18, 19 right now. In the next 10 years, you're going to go through a ton of change. Some of it's going to be short, like the time it took me from hating Big Head to loving it. Some of it's going to be longer. Some things take 2 to 5 to 10 years to change. But you think about it, where you're at now, 10 years from now, well, right now you're living at home with your parents or with a brother or sister or whatever. 10 years from now, you might own your own home. You might have your own kids, things like that. So you have a lot of change coming up, and part of my intent today is that some of these messages are things that will help you address that change when it comes up. In the last session, Mr. R pointed out to the kids that some of the stuff in the book that we're going to talk about doesn't really apply to you now, but it might be exactly the information you need 3 or 4 years from now. So I think that's the value of what we talk about today, that some of it are things that are going to make sense to you right now. Other stuff, put it in your pocket. 3 or 4 years from now, you might be glad you have that information. Okay? The second point is that what my friend Debbie did was basically, she demonstrated the power every one of us has to help somebody else out. I don't know if she thought Big Head was the coolest name in the school. Didn't matter then, it doesn't matter now. Just by her saying that, it reset my brain, it helped me out a ton. And all of you have the power to help other people that way, and I encourage you to take advantage of that. The high school graduate's owner's manual for me was something that I had wanted to do for a long time. My writing career started right here when I wrote for the Talisman, my sophomore, junior, senior year. I enjoyed it, it was fun, and I think I wrote some pretty good articles and probably wrote some pretty bad ones, like everybody else. And over the years from that point, I'd always thought I had a book in me. Many people do. probably many of you think someday I'm going to write a book. I started probably 5 or 6 different books, and at some point in each of them I thought, this isn't any good. I stopped. Something happened that led me to write this book, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I'm going to go to our next section here because I think this is a point that makes sense it's true for everybody. It's the title of a book chapter. It's called You Suck, So Does Everybody Else, It's Okay. I can see everybody's self-esteem just popped up a little bit when I said that. The point here is almost everyone starts out terrible at everything. Second point is almost anyone can become great at anything. It takes effort, focus, and time, probably a little help from good teachers or mentors. If you think back when you were young, first time you rode a bike, well, it probably had training wheels on it, so maybe you thought you were pretty good. Okay, the first time the training wheels were taken off, you were probably really scared, and you may have fallen down a couple times or whatever, but eventually you're all wobbly, but you learn how to ride that bike. Today you could probably do it in your sleep. Life works that way. Things that you initially are terrible at, are scared of, if you stay with them and just let time take care of itself, you can become great at them. Again, with my book situation, I'm going to get into the next section in a second here, but when I went into that, I knew nothing about writing a book. It's like a lot of things that you don't know what you don't know. So you get started on it, you start making progress, and you hit some dead ends because you say to yourself, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. So what I did then, and what a lot of people do, is I went to look for advice, okay? And the problem with advice is, how do you know if it's any good or if it's terrible advice? Now, I'm going to use my book as an example for, I thought I was getting good advice, but I wasn't. And I didn't know that till it didn't matter. It's too late. But I don't know if it would have mattered anyway, because when you start out, part of that process is you're learning through the process, okay? But in regard to my book, here it is right here, okay? I was working with a publisher. When you're an unknown person and you want to write a book, your best option is something called a vanity publisher, where you pay them, they don't pay you, okay? So it's a few $1,000 to work with a publisher. In that process, I'm thinking, okay, this book's going to be great. I just need a little direction, but I know what I want to put in it, and people want to buy it. One of the things I looked at was, what does it take to be a commercially successful book? Okay? I asked my publisher that. I said, how long does it have to be? And they said, well, you know, your book is geared toward high school kids. High school kids don't like to read, so it probably should be short. Okay, and again, I don't know if the publisher himself would have said it, but this is the person I'm working with. Well, a couple problems there. Number one, this book is really geared, the purchaser of this is not a high school student. It's your mom, your dad, your older brother, your older sister, your aunt or your uncle, or somebody who cares about you. And on the other hand of it, has no idea what to get you when you graduate from high school. Okay? That was who the potential audience for this book was. But the correct answer for how long should a book be is 175 pages or more. Why is that? Well, if you're trying to sell a book in a bookstore, somebody in the bookstore has to be able to read the spine of it. To get to 175 pages is the minimum amount you need in order for somebody, for a bookstore, to be willing to pick up that book and put it on their shelf. Okay? So that was some advice that I was given that was bad, but I didn't know it was bad. Okay? The other area I thought I would be able to sell this book was libraries. Okay? High school libraries. There's a little more than 26,000 public high schools in the United States. There's about another 10,000 private high schools in the United States. Okay? So I'm doing the math thinking, okay, every high school is going to want to buy my book, and if there's 36,000 some, probably half of them will buy it. I'm going to be selling a lot of books. So I was pretty excited about that. And I asked my publisher, you know, what do I got to do to sell this book to libraries? And they said, well, have a good cover, you know, make sure, you know, everything is spelled right, things like that. That's not the right answer. The right answer is you have to have an index in your book. Okay, for some reason, and I haven't really dove deep enough in it to see the reason, but a library in most cases will not consider your book if it doesn't have an index. Okay? My publisher didn't know that answer. All right? So I went through this process. I published this. It got great reviews from, you know, people that read it for the most part. A lot of parents that bought it for their children read it and got back to me and said, hey, this is great. And the information in the book is not necessarily something that you can use today. but it's something that is going to come up 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now. And if you read it and you take it to heart and know where it is, there's information in there you can put in your pocket till when you're going to need it down the road. And I think that's the value of it, because I've had very successful people come up to me and tell me I would have been more successful if I'd seen your book when I was 18. So that, I think, is the value of it. So moving forward, the next point I want to touch on is where do great ideas come from? And I'm going to start with the book and then I'll go on to some other things. I mentioned earlier that I worked for Hallmark Cards for 10 years, right out of college. It was a great company. I learned a heck of a lot there. And over the years, I've always kind of checked in. When I got to buy somebody a card, I'll look around the store, see what they got going on. Back in 2015, I was in there in early May, and I was looking to buy a Mother's Day card for my mom. So I'm in the store, probably the first week in May, walking around, and after I found her card, I walked to see what else was going on. I went over to the graduation section. And I started looking at all the different things they have for, high school graduates, college graduates. And you'd see things like plaques, that would have some congratulatory message. You see coffee mugs. You see little stuffed owls with mortarboard hats on them. And I had the thought that all that stuff is great, but is any kid that gets any of that going to look at it more than a week after they graduate, because now they're on to the rest of their life? Okay, and I thought there's a need to make available something that has some lasting value to a high school graduate or a college graduate, in this case, obviously, high school. And that's when it was like a lightning bolt. It hit me. I said, that's my book. I said, at that time, I was in my late 50s, and I thought, if I could pass on some of the experiences, some of the things I know to someone who's 18, just starting out, it could change her life. Okay? So that, for me, that was my great idea. That's where it came from. And the point on the slide is one great idea can change your life. And just to talk about some things that, you would all maybe connect with is, everybody knows what a selfie stick is, right? How many have one? Come on, it's more than two. Okay. The selfie stick, you might not know this, but it was originally invented in 1983. Okay? The first primitive camera was not in a cell phone until 2002. The selfie stick was originally invented by a guy named Hiroshi Uatu, and he was an engineer from Minolta. And he was on vacation with his family, and he wanted to get a picture of them in front of something. And he saw a kid going by, and he said, hey, will you take a picture of our family together? He handed his camera to the kid, and the little creep took off with it. Okay? And that inspired him. That was his inspiration to come up with a way that you could take a selfie, essentially, without having to have somebody you don't know help you out. And back in 1983, and the patent was issued in 1985, that was a uncommercial, unmarketable idea, because the only people that had a camera with them everywhere they went were professional photographers, photo enthusiasts, or my mom. My mom had a camera with her everywhere she ever went, and it's embarrassing to go home sometimes and see she has pictures of us doing everything, no matter what it was. My mom has like 5 too many pictures of it. But my point is, this was a great invention that was just invented ahead of its time, so it had no commercial value. You look at today, the selfie stick market and selfie stick accessories is a multi-billion-dollar market, because today everybody walks around with a camera in their pocket. And the other thing about where great ideas come from is you as young people are in a great position to come up with something, because you're always learning, you're looking at things differently than the people that are older than you. A lot of times you say to yourself, I could come up with a better way to do that. Two of the biggest examples are the guys that founded Apple Computers and Microsoft, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. These guys came up with the germ idea for those companies when they were teenagers. And both of those companies got successful pretty quick. So, kind of the takeaway from this section as we talk about it is, who's going to be the person that comes up with the next thing that nobody can live without, that everybody has to have in their pocket or on their desk? Because it could be anybody. It's just a matter of paying attention to what's going on, thinking about things, and just try to continue to mentally solve problems, because that's where it comes from. Talking about the working world a little bit. Many of you have jobs right now. You will all have jobs at some point, and there's certain things that really will help you be more successful. If you look at the job world, it's competitive. Any job worth having has several people that want to get that job. How do you help give yourself an advantage? Because the job process starts with an interview and it goes from there. First thing is look good. Have your hair cut or clean, wear clean clothes, have clean hands. This might sound stupid or very unfair, but adults judge you in about 10 to 15 seconds when they first see you, okay? Now, again, that may not be fair. You could be a great person, but if you come in looking like a dog's lunch, you've moved to the back of that line because, again, there's other people that are going to be coming in looking for that same job. Once you get the job, you need to show initiative, show effort, and be able to learn. When you're hired for a job, that employer does not expect you to know how to do that job. They expect you to show up on time every day, be ready to work, and be able to pick up the basics. And work smart when you're at the job. One of the things that you see a lot of times is people have, again, entry-level jobs where they kind of go around like Eeyore and they're just, trying to get through the day. That's not going to get you promoted. That's not going to get you advanced. What you want to do is think about what jobs are beyond that, because most companies hire from within, and there are better jobs that pay more money and have a much better quality of life down the road, but you need to differentiate yourself from the other entry-level people so you have the best opportunity to get into the next level jobs. Part of the way you do that is interact with your managers. Ask them questions. Ask them, I'm struggling with this. Is there a better way to do it? Could you give me kind of some insight? They love doing that. And they also, then they form a bond with you because those are the people that determine who gets that next job. So, everybody starts out at the bottom of the totem pole, but most companies have very nice positions a couple steps up. If you can manage to get yourself recognized as somebody that is worth investing their time in, because that's what it comes down to. When you're hired, that company is doing you a favor. They're bringing in somebody that they're going to have to teach and develop, and if you can make that part of it easier for them, they're going to want to help you back. So I think that's a real big thing about, in the work world, show initiative, let them know you want to help them be successful, because again, companies are there to make a profit. They're not there to give you a job. And so the more you can help them with what they're trying to do, the more they're going to help you because it's in their best interest.
Jim, can I
Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go on to something that is related to the working topic, and that is getting tattoos. For whatever reason, they're a very huge draw for a lot of young people, but they also can be extremely detrimental to you. If you go in for a job interview and you have visible tattoos, depending on what line of work it is, but for many lines of work, that's a non-starter. You will not get that job, okay? Tattoos are fine. A lot of my friends have them, and a lot of them look pretty cool. But until you're established, it's something to be very careful with. If you get them where you can't see them, when you're wearing your work clothes. Getting a tattoo on your hands, neck, or your face, you've eliminated yourself from probably about 95% of the opportunities that are out there. And when you're starting out, you need all the help you can get. And when you do something like that, and the reason it's such a negative is what it says is this person has bad judgment. What are they going to do if I hire them? If their judgment is so poor that they put a tattoo on their neck or on their hands or whatever. And the other thing you have to think about in this area, your brain is going to change. Your brain at 30 is going to be way different than it is now. At 40, it's going to be way different than it is now. At 50, at 60. When you get inked up as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, you're telling your 30, 40, 50-year-old self to go take a hike. There's no 40 or 50-year-old on the planet that would want to have to live with the decision they made as an 18-year-old, okay? But it happens, and I see it so many times, young people that have basically eliminated so many options they might have ahead of themselves because they decided to put a tattoo on their neck. So just something to be careful with, because it's something that, again, I've seen so many young people hurt themselves because they did that. You know, in a moment they thought it'd be something cool, something fun. And the other thing about tattoos is that I've had a lot of friends over the years that decided they had to get their tattoos removed. It's an extremely expensive process, and it's something that takes time. It can be painful, and they're not always able to remove them. I mean, you're never going to look the way you did before you had them. So it's something, just think about you down the road, and if that's really a good idea. Okay. This next topic is something that I found was, again, very important. It's giving something back, volunteering, helping other people. All you have done that because you've either done it with a little brother, little sister, a neighbor, whether it's shoveling their snow, cutting their lawn, helping an elderly lady get her groceries in from her car, or service things you've done through the school itself. I encourage you to continue to do that once you get out of high school, because it makes you a better person. If you look at people that do a lot of work for others, almost invariably, if they're asked, well, what do you get out of this? They almost always say, I get much more than I give, because just how it makes me feel knowing I can help other people, that I can help make their life better. And throughout your life, there's different ways you help people. When you're younger, you have more time than money, so it's like putting your time into something, whether it's Big Brothers and Sisters, whether it's Habitat for Humanity, whether it's helping out with a daycare, things like that. What I encourage you to do at your age is look for things you're interested in. If you think you may want to go into some of the trades, it's great helping out at a Habitat for Humanity project, because you're going to be working alongside of guys that already know how to do it. The other thing is, within volunteer work, many times you're working with people that know other people that might be able to help you. Okay? And it's something that, again, it's part of building who you are, because you know your formal education to this point, you know, ends at the end of grade 12 when you graduate, but your life education begins at that point. And this is one of the areas where you can really enrich who you are. My personal, track record on this, when I had younger kids, my son was in Cub Scouts. Cub Scout pack was going down the tubes. They needed somebody to come in and be the Cub Master. I didn't have time to do it, but nobody else would do it, and I knew my son loved it, so I became the Cub Master. Turned out to be one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done, and I had a blast. Got help from other parents, and we turned a dying Cub Scout pack into basically a raging success. I ended up being the Boy Scout leader too, and that was not a great fit because I'm not an outdoorsman. I don't have a clue. I haven't slept in a tent since the day I was done being the Boy Scout leader. Okay, I like sleeping indoors, but I got help from other dads, and again, it was something where nobody else was really there to do it, so I did it. But I got the rewards I got from that far outweighed the effort I put in. As I've gotten older, my mother is 95 years old, and she's needed help for the last probably about 8 to 10 years. So I've helped her. I've helped her friends. I enjoy being with seniors because they are some of the nicest people you're ever going to meet, and they've got the greatest experience in the world. And there's things like that. One last example. Sometimes you get a chance to help somebody by accident. I was driving out of my driveway going somewhere about 4 or 5 years ago. It was colder and crap out. It's kind of like this winter's been. And I saw a car next to the side of the road, and there was nobody in it, and it was running. So I kind of looked around. I noticed there was a person lying down next to it. And it was about 10 degrees. The wind was blowing like crazy. Stopped my car, get out of the car. It was, I think Bill was about 85 at the time. Okay, 85-year-old man had gone to check his mail, slipped on the ice, fell on the ice, and he broke his leg. He couldn't get up. And he's lying there, he's in pain, and I get on the street next to him, talking to him, asking him what happened, and can I help you up? And he says, no, I think I broke my leg. So I said, okay. Now, I had been to a Packer game that weekend, so I had heavy-duty blankets and stuff in the car that I hadn't put away yet. So I got those out, wrapped him up, kept him warm, called 911, kept him talking, and long story short, Bill survived. He went into rehab. I started visiting him because his family was out of town. So I visited him about once or twice a week while he was in rehab. And then once he was back in his home, we lived about a block and a half away, I basically became his friend. All of a sudden I had an 85-year-old buddy. And I'd go over and see him usually maybe every other week. We'd have him over to my house for dinner. My mom was in his age range, so the two of them knew people in common, and it was very enjoyable. And that's something I never expected, that when I was in my 50s, all of a sudden I'd have an 85-year-old buddy. And we'd have lunch, and he just passed away this last year, but his daughter, who's from Tennessee, you know, at his funeral came up to me and said, "You helped give him 4 more years of life." And that just, God, that just hits you. But that's the power, again, all you have to do good for others. So now I'm going to tell you the rest of the Big Head story, okay? One thing, like when I was here, when you were about to graduate, like you guys are, they would measure you for your cap and gown. And I don't know if they still measure you like they did back then, but back then, they would actually...
Did they still measure you guys?
Did you like height and weight?
Height and weight, okay.
So it's probably one size fits all cap. But
Yeah.
back then, you actually had a fitted cap. And we're coming up on that time of year, and one of my buddies said to me, he said, "Big Head, you might have a problem." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "What if somebody has a bigger head than you?" And I'd never thought of that. And we, you know, it was pretty common, the company that we got the cap and gowns from, everybody got their head, they got measured the same day. So I go in, the day I go into the gym to have that, there's a crowd there waiting to see how big my head's going to be. And the tail of the tape came through. I had the biggest head in the high school, 7 5/8. And so the name stuck, and it was just another benefit I got from the name. So that's most of my prepared stuff. Is there any questions anybody had that they wanted to throw out there? Yes?
What was your high school experience like?
High school experience was awesome. Okay, when I was that age, I always thought I'm at the best age a kid could ever be. And I had great friends. We had a lot of activities. I loved coming here. We had great teachers. My only complaint, okay, is one of my favorite things was being in marching band. Okay, I was a drummer. Anybody in band here? Well, in marching band, the drummer is the coolest thing to be because you're always playing. You're just walking down the streets, you're always playing. Everybody else has to walk and carry their instrument. Drummers get to go non-stop. I was first chair drummer my junior year, then senior year I was second chair drummer because Mr. Spangenberg was the teacher and his son joined the band that year, and his son was way better than me, okay? So I'm second chair drummer, but I was good. I went to school in Madison. I had no idea they had a marching band. You guys are you all familiar with Madison's marching band?
Yeah. They're like one of the best if you haven't seen them.
They're incredible, and at the time they were the best in the country because nobody did what they did. I could have gone into band, I didn't know about it, and I didn't go to a football game till about 3/4 through the season, which is the first time I saw their marching band. And I was like, nobody told me about this. So, but to answer your question, high school was awesome. Had great teachers, had great friends, and I still go to my high school reunions. My classes had them every 5 years, and we just had our 40th a couple of years ago. We have our 45th coming up in 2 years, and it's a blast. I encourage you to go to your high school reunions because these are the people you've known your whole life. You know, you're going to make great friends and all that as you go forward, but people from here, this is your base, this is your rock, and my experience was great.